everyone. We're starting a little late today, but wanted to kind of take everybody through a short PowerPoint presentation and then get into an actual live demonstration of this AP solutions. Now, there's a number of AP solutions available through PIF Technologies, so we want to introduce those now. Okay, just one second here. All right. So obviously, the objective of today's presentation is to educate everybody a little bit on the solutions that are available through PIF Technologies. Most of you are current DocStar customers and may not recognize or know about some of these new features. So basically, our whole approach is reducing labor costs, data entry automation, and taking common business tasks like routing and matching and automating those through our intelligent workflow and our smart OCR technology. Now, there's certainly different concepts or approaches to AP automation depending on budget, volume in terms of invoices processed, number of FTEs that are coding, routing, and matching documents. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into each one of these sections. Certainly, once you have documents in the system, we can keep track of things like reporting, the ability to know when a document hasn't been approved and how long it hasn't been approved for. Audit support, so you have your auditors coming in. They're easily able to look at these different types of documents with the right security. And certainly if you are geographically distributed, if you have offices all over the country, world, this allows for ease of use in terms of searching vendor invoices and all their backup documentation. And certainly from a disaster recovery, business continuity strategy, stuff that gets scanned in, it's digitized, it's backed up to the Amazon cloud with little to no data loss should an event occur. So if you really think about an AP process, and unfortunately there hasn't been a standard that's come out very similar to healthcare where there's a standard invoice layout. Unfortunately, every vendor looks and feels different, and it's very difficult to process those documents in a timely manner and also do it in a way that's very efficient. So, documents do arrive in a number of different ways now, not so much mail anymore, a lot of email, but certainly fax, maybe even a download. Somebody actually has to look at it, figure out, hey, this is an invoice, this is a packing slip, what it is, separate the documents, key the data into the appropriate ERP system. So for instance, receiving packing slip, entering the receiving data in, and then the invoice and vouchering and matching those particular documents. Certainly the data that gets entered can be very error prone. Certainly from a manual, any process, there's going to be mistakes. And certainly then you have to do the manual matching and, hey, what line items don't match, and do the mathematical equations using a calculator or some other means, again, which can generate errors and very costly from a time labor perspective. Certainly then you'll have to have the human route it, sneaker netting, certainly for things like inventory or non-inventory based purchasing or non-PO based purchasing. You're going to have to route that. You need approval for these invoices. There's nothing to match against the purchase order and the PO because it doesn't exist. It hasn't been pre-approved. And then certainly then you have to generate the check batch and print that and maybe attach that to all the backup and route the check and all the backup to a human to approve, and then manually voucher that particular transaction. So that is a very time sensitive, very time consuming process. And if you do look at world-class AP departments, here's just a kind of a Aberdeen group snippet here of, laggards of the bottom typical performers in most AP departments. You're looking at $35 waste per invoice on average from a best in class to a laggard. So $38 versus $3. So if you do process 500 invoices a month, that equates to $210,000 in lost efficiency, either related to labor or soft cost productivity savings. You then look at the typical decrease in early payment discounts, and this generates about another $8,000 in missed early payment discounts per year. and certainly the longer it takes you to process those documents, one, it's harder to get better vendor terms, get early payment discounts, as well as the ability to control your cash. With this type of a solution that you're going to see in the various steps that we can take, we can improve visibility into your accounting process, control it, get tighter as an organization, and start to resource allocate people that do lower value work like data entry and matching to higher value work, getting better terms, troubleshooting, pricing issues and things like that. So let's take a look at the three approaches to automation. We've always termed the phrase crawl, walk, run, just like anything, step 1, 2, and 3. But in this particular scenario, I'm going to break out the different approaches. Certainly the crawl approach, and many of you might have this today, is our basic document management with a database lookup to your ERP system. So in this case, you would use dual monitors, scan in all the invoices, and instead of you keying from the physical image, the piece of paper or the email, you're keying right within the image in DocStar on your left and your ERP on your right. This certainly helps long-term because you have all the documents. You're storing these documents in such a way that, again, they won't get wet, they won't catch on fire. You can then search those documents like an AP invoice with all the related documents, packing lists, purchase orders, checks, correspondence. And really, it's what you do today, but we're augmenting it with the scanning process. So overall, you're not looking at a huge efficiency savings, but rather a way to comply, certainly depending on the type of organization you are, put in something that does give you some audit support. It's easy to install, it's low cost, and it's really one of those things where you're implementing an electronic file cabinet, removing the paper. So if you do or are in a metropolitan area where the rent is expensive per square foot, file cabinets do you no good. And this is a pure file cabinet replacement approach. The walk approach is a little bit more. Now we're starting to talk about automating with workflow. And certainly if the walk towards run approach also, now that we have some of the data in the system, we then can route it and then push the data to another system. So the walking approach is ideal for situations where you don't want to push and pull data directly from your ERP, but more interested in the routing and approval. This is really ideal for non-PO based or non-inventory invoice routing because there is nothing to match against and there's no previous approval in your ERP system. You're going to need to do that approvals within DocStar. So the steps in this particular case is you would key the invoice data into DocStar. You would then route that document for approval. Based on the data that we have in DocStar, we can then go out to an external data source like your ERP and do either a 2- or 3-way match, depending if you do get receivers and if it is inventory or not. Then also has the support for line item coding. Again, if you don't generate purchase orders, that becomes even more important. So if you're a property management firm where you have property managers that need to GL code these invoices and you're using stamps today, this is going to be a big win for you. And then certainly, which is optional, we have the ability to use our robotic process automation. This is a low-cost way to push data from DocStar into your ERP via the UI, the user interface. And this is a lot less expensive than a back-end type of an approach, which you'll see in our running approach as we move forward. I guess the benefit here is this single point of data entry. You're entering the data in DocStar and you're not having to enter it in the ERP or vice versa. You have the electronic approvals, reducing any type of manual routing, moving paper between manila folders on people's desks, and certainly gives full control and visibility over the AP process. You know how long it took, who's not getting back to you in terms of approvals, as well as the ability to accrue for pending transactions, things that are going through the approval process. And I guess the run approach is kind of the end-all be-all. This is, the kind of the home run here, where we try to reduce all data entry. And certainly, even with our smart OCR technology, we're reducing the data entry almost completely, there is a validation verification process. So in this particular capability, we're capturing invoices or sales orders or other unstructured documents from any source, scanner, MFP, fax, email. We're then automatically classifying it as an invoice, sales order, or packing list, separating the documents. So if you did have 10 invoices in one batch, it will separate based on the change in invoice number. And then it extracts all the header, footer, and line item detail. That data then goes to a AP clerk for low confidence character verification, as well as any fixing of rules. So we're actually pulling data, PO data, inventory data from your ERP, and we're doing the mathematical equations, ensuring that subtotal tax freight equals the total amount, as well as all the line items, quantity times unit cost equals total cost. And this is done automatically, reducing significant labor expense in that particular process. If it is not inventory, we then, route the PO for approval. And then if it is approved, we then push the data into the ERP, usually through some either existing integration, and we have integrations into most common popular ERP systems like Sage products, Dynamics products, Epicor, as well as things like Infor, and other kind of mainstream products like QuickBooks and Peachtree and things like that. Obviously, the benefit here is the no data entry. The data is sourced from the OCR from the documents, and the data then ends up in your ERP. So we're removing a lot of that process. Also, little to no prepping of the documents. You're scanning in batch. You're not using separator sheets. And certainly, if you are scanning mixed sorts of documents, you're scanning an invoice that also has a pack list behind it. Contextually, we can classify that and know how to handle those particular documents. So let's just discuss the run approach a little bit further. In this particular approach, we are leveraging the smart OCR, and that's really what the run approach is. It's leveraging a smart OCR technology, which, you probably need 1,000, 2,000 invoices a month to justify this type of an expense. And certainly, depending on the complexity of your ordering and or AP process, how many users you have in your AP department. And again, resource allocating those to more high value work. But the way it works is basically a funnel, capture from any source, email, scan, MFP, fax. We then classify the document, separate it based on those classifications, extract the header data and the footer data. So header data is things like invoice number, invoice date. Footer information might be total or subtotal or freight or tax. And then the line item detail. So things like, the item number, the quantity. And the way this works is using spatial relationships and synonym matching to find and extract that tabular data. So when it sees item, quantity, description, rate, or unit costs next to one another from a spatial relationship, it knows that's likely a table and will look positionally downwards. It can de-interlace line items where you do have line items that are kind of multi-line, and you're really looking to just extract the not the descriptions, but the viable data, the quantities, the unit costs, item codes, etc. And then any validation, mathematical equations, database lookups will show below here in that particular area. This way you can easily adjudicate invoices without having to be in your accounting system, looking up different PO values. That will all be done automatically in a seamless fashion. And then certainly the ability to then send this into the document management workflow. So again, document management, this will serve a number of different purposes. Generically, from a crawl approach, this is, you store everything in here. We're going to be pulling data from your data source, but in this particular case, all the data and the physical image are placed into a workflow queue for final processing. So in situations where there isn't APO or isn't inventory, this is going to be useful for that routing and approval process. If you are distributed, like property managers, real estate, where you're actually doing GL coding, each GL code at the bottom here can be pulled from your ERP, so you just enter the GL code or the description for the GL code, and it will automatically populate that. It does sync with your ERP's vendor master, your GL codes, or your chart of accounts seamlessly within down to 15 seconds. Certainly things like electronic signatures, related documents, being in an invoice and seeing the PO, the packing list, the check, any correspondence is all available in this interface as well. And also because the workflow queue and each user will have their own queue, as a CFO, controller, or an accounting manager, you can see holistically where that document is within the process, who has it, and what are the pending next steps. We also can apply things like records management, which out of the box comes with the DocStar Eclipse ECM product. And typical financial documents are 7 years in a day, where we can create a record category to move those documents. And the document workflow, certainly with the walk approach, we add workflow. This adds a level of complexity, certainly a level of cost, but we're starting to automate those common business tasks, matching. Are we looking at the sum level? The PO is 1,000, invoice is 1,000, thumbs up. You know, what do we do with short shipments? You know, what do we do with inventory items? Do we look at the line item? Do they have a unique part number? Does the manufacturer's part number equal your part number? So situations like that we'll scope as part of our pre-sales process. Routing the documents. How are those happening today? Is it based on vendor? Typically, these are in non-inventory, non-PO based routing, cost center, dollar amount. Do you want to just manually select the approver? So, you know, we can do that type of routing right within the workflow tool here within DocStar. Validating data. Again, pulling vendor IDs, payment terms. You know, if the payment terms on the invoice that we extract and the payment terms on the vendor card are different, how do we deal with that? So various types of logic we can build in using these if then else logic steps that you see here in these white blocks. And then, you know, line of business integration. In this particular case, we're not really talking about pushing and pulling data. We're talking about image enabling. The idea of you being in your line of business system, your ERP, and be able to hit a hotkey or a button to retrieve those particular documents. You know, the ability for you to you know, take contextual classification data that's on your ERP system. You know, you're on a payables transaction entry screen. You know, then I want to find AP invoices. We can then, when you click the button, screen scrape the document number, the invoice number, the purchase order number to automatically find those documents and pop them up on your screen. This can also be used for vendor portals or public access to records by using a URL-based searching parameters. So you can see here we can pass parameters to a URL to return a result set or a specific document. And this certainly reduces the learning curve. People can exist within your line of business while maintaining documents in a single content repository, DocStar. And certainly if you're an AP clerk, you're going to be concerned with accounts payable documents, but how about HR? You know, if you are a Dynamics GP user and you're using the HR module, but you really want to retrieve HR documents, we can contextually classify that and know, based on the screen you're on, what to retrieve. And certainly if there's any questions, you'll notice at the bottom there is on the GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar search bar or panel, there's a questions and answers area. So feel free to ask any questions you'd like. At the end of the presentation, I will open it up for any questions you might have. So at the end of the process, and certainly also in the beginning of the process, you might be generating internal documents that you produce. And those documents, there's really no need to print them and then scan them and have to re-index them. In our particular case, we can use a zone OCR approach. So using the RPM or Remote Print Manager driver, printing the documents will physically print the document, but also drop a PDF to a hot folder, which DocStar will monitor. And in a lot of cases, because a print file is typically text-based, not GDI generated, we'll use some sort of an overlay process. So for instance, a check. You print a check, you typically have check stock, and that is check stock put into the printer. Whereas us, we will have a PDF overlay that looks exactly like your check stock. We'll then take a copy of that, put that into a hot folder where the DocStar system will monitor OCR in the check number, and then do a database lookup on that check number to find all matching invoices paid. This will allow us to then match the check to the invoice, to the PO, to the packing slip, all in one area. And this is generically used for anything you produce. So if you do purchase orders or packing slips out of your system, these are other very common uses. And then lastly, the reporting. Reporting with ReportWorks. It's a module within DocStar that allows us to get visibility into our process. And if we are going to do a running approach, we're going to be front-ending your ERP system. So visibility into pending invoices that are pending approval, controlling your cash flow, understanding what POs have no matching invoices, so you can adjudicate those with your vendors, as well as the ability to look at just metrics for performance. World-class AP departments really focus on performance. How long it takes to process an invoice, how much labor costs, are we doing it the most efficient way? And this will allow you to do that and get that visibility. All right, so we're going to do just a quick demonstration here, and we're going to show kind of the, in this particular case, a GP Dynamics full AP automation. So we're going to take a couple of AP invoices here, and I'm just running this on a virtual machine, and we're going to take, we'll take these 3 documents and this Acme Company PDF, and we're just going to drop them in this folder. So we're going to emulate what a photocopier would typically do, which is drop files to a directory, pick them up, and process them. So you'll see here that it quickly and very easily picked up those documents. The second step will be, waiting a few minutes. Certainly go back to your desk if you're scanning from a photocopier, and you'll see now a number of different single sign-on utility bar here. We're going to open our verification station. So this is where it's actually going to go through a 2-step process. So instead of you having maybe 4 full-time employees, FTEs, coding, matching documents, you can reduce that down to 1 person and have those other 2 or 3 people do other more high-value work. So we'll hit our Get Next Batch, and this is going to bring up our documents we just processed. So it does go through the full recognition, separation, classification process, and then it's just a matter of now verifying and going through a 2-step process. That 2-step process includes low confidence character verification. OCR is never going to be 100%, as well as what we'll consider a rules verification. So you'll notice we captured 4 documents, 3 only show up here. That's because the 4th document read with 100% confidence. There was no issue, so it moved on into the DocStar system. So I'm going to go through a 2-step process here of verifying the batch, or F7, which is going to do low confidence characters. It gives us a little verification window. Even if it wasn't able to extract data with high confidence, you're still able to get in here, and it's a very clean interface for adjudicating documents. You'll see here it highlights in red where it found it had a low confidence. In my case, I just hit enter or confirm wherever there's an issue, and it moves to the next low confidence. And we'll move to our last document here, and you can see that in this particular case, there's actually an issue. It pulled the I, which is actually the corner of that box. So basically, out of all those documents, there's 1 issue. Okay, so the second approach, and this is where it's going to auto-learn. So this system actually auto-learns and gets smarter as it goes. And you'll see here that when I do that, now it's highlighted in yellow here, and it tells me below I need to GL code this. So I can come in here, select my GL coding box, and this is where I can split line items between multiple GL codes. The GL codes that are in this particular drop-down list are fed from your ERP system. And once I take care and address that particular issue, that goes away, and I can hit F8 again, which will allow me to move to the next issue. In this particular case, I'm getting a field arithmetic rule error, and as you can see, I look at this and it says that the math doesn't work, and I can see that the freight value is incorrect, so I can put that to 0, and it won't make that mistake again. So this is where it will learn from its mistakes. Now I can see I don't have an item code here, so we can use our click-free entry, and I'm going to use this to literally hover over, and as I click, it will populate in a downward fashion. Again, I need to GL code this, which I'll code to a service account. Hit save here, and then click F8 again, which will move to my last document. And in this particular case, you'll notice it highlights in yellow. The phone number is what we use to actually get the vendor information. In this particular case, it found 2 vendor records for that particular phone number, possible different ship to addresses, etc. So I'm going to select the appropriate one, and again, it will update. Now, if I didn't want to GL code this, I could always select the accept with warnings, which will allow me to skip that and move forward. And upon final, I can just hit my send batch button, which will then automate the pushing of all the data and the documents into the repository. Okay, so in this particular case, you'll see here, we'll now go into our document management system, and we'll see under our workflow queue, you'll see those 4 documents that we processed. So I do select our 3D pipe here, you'll notice when we do open this, it will have all the data filled in. So you'll see here the vendor name, the vendor ID. You'll notice when I click on vendor ID and I select the down arrow, it will load all the vendor master data from, in this particular case, Dynamics GP into our we'll call pick list or drop down. And that just allows us to validate to ensure that there's valid information within the system. So in this case, the AP clerk is going to select from a list of approvers. Now this could happen automatically. And when I hit submit, this is now going to go and be assigned from the admin or the AP clerk to the B. Wessler, in this case, the approver. And once that happens, it will now go into Brent's workflow queue. And you'll notice if I now log in as Brent and you see this queue here, you'll see the 3D pipe document. Okay, and you'll now see I'm logged in as Brent, and you see an approve and deny, and you also see all of the line item detail, the GL coding, all of that information. Certainly if you have to split, you can add additional rows. You can edit the metadata here as you choose fit. And when I'm done, what I'm going to do is I can apply a stamp signature if I choose. So I grab that, and I'm going to select the Brent here, and I'll apply that. Certainly there's a full audit trail of everything, so if you don't choose to apply a physical stamp, you do have a full audit trail. It'll tell you everything that happened, whether I applied that stamp, what I changed, what did I do to this particular document, and all of that is updated real time within our audit trail. So in this particular case, I'm going to hit my approve. And once I hit approve, now typically this can go back to an AP clerk, or you can choose to, once I approve it, actually push the voucher entry into Great Plains Dynamics, which is what I'm going to be doing. So once I'm done with that here, we're going to minimize that. I'm going to open up my copy of GP Dynamics, and I'm going to go to my navigation pane. Let's see, we got that. Okay. And I'm going to move that over so we can see that if we go in, we have our payables batch. We've created a 3D, well, it's called Eclipse batch, but you'll see that it has a number of transactions in there. And we're going to be able to show you how the data that was in that invoice in DocStar is now as a voucher entry within, in this particular case, Great Plains. So we'll open this batch up. Select our transactions. And again, every ERP is a little different. We'll select our voucher entry. We select our 3D pipe. You'll see all the distribution data that was also added. In this particular case, we have to create a GL amount and actually add a pay line to the purchases so that it does the debit credit. And we do that automatically. And then we have a button here that will retrieve this particular document. So we can either open up this particular document, or we can just simply hit the retrieve button here. Oops. Let me close that record. different one. Transactions. Doesn't like the duplicate. That's fine. Okay. And now we'll hit the DocStar retrieve, and this will retrieve the document that's associated with that. And this is using the invoice number, but certainly can use a purchase order or vendor name or really anything. And that can actually happen also through, you can also put in just the vendor name like 3D Pipe, and this will also bring back all matching documents. Now, if I'm in that particular invoice, for instance, and I want to see all the related documents, so I'm in the invoice, I can now go down to my related documents here and see the purchase order and the check, and simply by clicking on it, it will launch a different tab for me. So I have my my invoice here, and then I have my check in this particular case, or purchase order in this case. So that's a high-level overview of the solution. I guess at this point, if there's any questions, I'll open up the lines here. If you just raise your hand, or you can put in the question and answer area within your GoToMeeting area, and we can now answer any questions you might have. If you don't have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, Brent Wessler, at our main number, 603-622-2122, or piftechnologies.com, and we can go from there. Well, I appreciate everybody's time today, and have a great rest of the week. Take care.